On a Tuesday, August afternoon in 1931, the Yankees began the day at Navin Field in Detroit in an unaccustomed spot. 16 games out of first place. It was soon to be 17 as the Tigers got a run in the 11th off lefty Gomez to edge the Bombers 5-4. Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig went a combined 0 for 10 with 3 strikeouts. On that same day, Anthony Michael Russo came into this world in New York City, and no, Sports Radio 66 was not blaring in the delivery room. Lucky for the Iron Horse and the Bambino, because if there was an afternoon drive program that young Tony could have dialed in on, he would have demanded that Lou and the Babe be traded in a package deal on the spot. Somewhere in his adolescence, Tony developed 4 beliefs that carried him throughout his life. The Yankees being all supreme was obviously one, but far more important was devotion to family, hard work brings with it just rewards, and a simplicity, don't make things too complicated. He grew up in Flushing, the second of 2 children of Phyllis and Rudolph Russo, both second-generation Italians, although his mother did spend her formative years in Italy. His father, meanwhile, grew up in Lower Manhattan, rooting for the turn-of-the-century Giants. Rudy, a good player in his own right, a third baseman for City College, bestowed his love on baseball on his only son. His mother always called him Anthony, even while cooking him big lunches when he was in his 60s. But long before that, Tony's young life was nondescript, spending every summer bugling away at sleepaway camp and getting himself through early high school with minimal academic achievement. That may or may not have been the reason that his parents sent him away to Darrow, a relatively new Shaker boarding school in upstate New York. Upon graduation, Tony spent 2 years at Pace University, but quickly realizing that higher education wasn't his calling, so he found his way into the jewelry business as a salesman. The Harry Strigler Corporation was his first real break, with offices in the Jensen Silva Company building on 53rd and 5th. And fortunately for him, somebody else worked in that building as a language translator, 8th floor. And one day, this young lady with the hard-to-miss English accent was having lunch by herself in the building's cafeteria. In stumbled young Tony. He fumbled an introduction, thinking she was French, but managed to secure a phone number. Their first date was at his parents' house, who were throwing a post-New Year's Day bash. Must have went well. He asked for her hand in May, married in August. Their 57th wedding anniversary was celebrated in a hospital room a week ago Monday. Likability was a key component in Dad's life. That made up for a 3.8 GPA and a law degree from Harvard that he did not have. Dad used that personality to forge a career with jewelry. Fine jewelry at that. Tiffany and Saks Fifth Avenue, New York City, manufacturing outfits spread all over, but with a preponderance of them in Providence, retail shops along the shores of the Caribbean that fed off the tourists, docked off the cruise ships. Tony traveled, sweated, and carted those heavy bags lined with fine goods. He sold, and not without the help of some savviness. I was with him one time in Providence where a particular customer was grumbling about the quality of the merchandise. Getting nowhere, Tony went out to his Buick Skylark, put the same goods in a different bag, and bingo, had himself a big order. You did not need a Harvard education for that. I was born in 59, a year the Yankees thankfully did not win it, and grew up with the same love for baseball that had enraptured Tony and Rudy before him. But much to Tony's chagrin, I didn't care about DiMaggio or Henrik and gravitated to the Giants, ironically Rudy's first team. Tony adjusted and even helped cement the relationship. One summer weekend in '68, Dad paraded our Philadelphia hotel lobby where the Giants were staying. And damn if Dad wasn't going to get some autographs. The only player who wouldn't sign for his 8-year-old was Willie Mays. So a different Willie, McCovey, quickly became his son's main man. I wasn't a bad player myself, playing shortstop because Chris Spire was playing it. I had a little promise. But then in year 2 of my career, Tony decided he wanted a crack at being the next Casey Stengel, and the Syosset Little League reluctantly allowed him in. But we all quickly learned that the Newt Rockne approach doesn't work in baseball, nor do the 3-hour outdoor practices in March. I did not become Phil Rizzuto, Tony did not become Stengel, and the Little League asked him to retire after 2 seasons. But Chris followed Tony's footsteps to Darrow, and Dad leaving his only child at the mountaintop in September of '74 was one of the best things he ever did. Expensive as well, but the goods must have been still flying out of those heavy bags. Rollins College was my college choice with Dad's blessing, and that was double the Darrow tuition costs. But the Caribbean ships still packed. No bank loan payments for me. In the meantime, Tony got on that 812 every day out of Syosset, the 548 home, Molly's spaghetti dinners, and the Channel 5 all in the family reruns, Providence every 3 weeks, St. Thomas twice a year, the 2-week summer vacation spent in various locales, but increasingly more in Santa Fe. The country club set was never Tony's thing. Gin rummy with the boys, the Saturday early morning foursomes, At one time, that broken elbow that he suffered at 15 and never reset was useful. It kept him out of the Korean War. But now in middle age, he barely could pick up a tennis racket. When it was time for the son to start a career, Tony was beside himself, not knowing what to do. Try as he might, he could not pick up the phone and call Marv, Vin, or Howard. When he realized that the mailman was not going to help in getting his son a foot in the door, he sent him on his way. Jacksonville, Florida, of all places, in the old 72 AMC Gremlin, and some cash in his pocket. Well, somehow Jacksonville turned into Orlando, with a real job at a real station with a 2-hour nightly show. Tony soon replaced that AMC Gremlin with a brand new 1984 Honda Civic. Tiffany and Sachs must have still been accepting his calls because no car payments were required. I wasn't aware of this until incredibly last May, but I never knew how many big World Series games Tony had been to. We all know about the DiMaggio phase, sitting in the center field bleachers for 50 cents with Rudy, but did we know he was at the famous Mickey Owen pass ball game at Ebbets Field in '41? Or Al Gianfrido's game-saving catch against his beloved DiMaggio in 1947? Or Henrich's game-winning home run in '49 off Newcomb? Burdett's Game 7 gem in '57? Koufax's 15K game in Game 1 of 1963? McCarver's 3-run 10th-inning homer game at the stadium in '64, and there's plenty more. That all came in handy when his son found his way to WFAN, with a new partner who loved the Yankees more than his dad did. The new guy had Mantle, the old guy had DiMaggio, and together they had watched a lot of parades. And when his son swallowed his pride and took Dad to see the new Yankees, it was the new partner who answered the calls on the radio when Tony, in spats of frustration, wanted to trade off Jeter and Mario. Dad had at least had one last gap to fill, and it took his son a long time to fill it. But love finally overtook the reluctant 35-year-old, and before it was too late, Tony had a new daughter-in-law. Her name was Jean. Came from a big Irish family, which suited Dad just fine. More people to talk to about DiMaggio. But eventually things changed. The cruise ships were not as packed. Providence suddenly dried up, and Tiff, account executive. So Molly, loving the field, wanted to move to Santa Fe. No tea times to worry about. The Yankees were now on satellite, and no grandchildren to dote on just yet. So for the love of his wife, Tony headed to the Badlands of New Mexico. But before Tony got too lonely, his new daughter-in-law sprung a surprise. 4, in fact, in 7 years. All of a sudden, Tony had himself an infield. He was the first to hold Timmy. Always wanted a baby girl. Here came Kira. Loved to laugh. Hello, Colin. And then Patrick, whose arrival in July 2005 cheered everybody up after the death of his other granddad the previous May. So now Dad had everything. A new Yankee dynasty, his son on cable TV, 4 beautiful grandchildren, a lifetime supply of squeaky clean gift certificates for those Buick Skylarks of his, and the cleanest garage in the Southwest. After a while, he even got a new feature on his son's new radio platform. Now he can rant about the Yankees on the aptly named Tony's Take and get paid $125 an appearance. Imagine that. The one thing that was missing from Tony's life that all his spirit, personality, and common man approach could not solve was a relationship with his 4 nephews and nieces. As is often the case, family squabbles get in the way of common sense. It's not repaired, time is lost, and relationships are forgotten. But as we say goodbye to Tony today, and send him upward to the great Yankee in the sky, two things are not lost. One, his son, who in his life's journey has shown that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And two, a return of those nieces and nephews who, even in middle age, remember their gregarious, fun-loving relative from 50 years ago. So when Tony took ill and they were notified, they were proactive and made sure they were represented in this church today. Molly's husband, Chris's dad, their uncle, Tony.